Hi, everybody.
We are happy and humbled to be with you here today at GraphQL Summit. A year ago, we were here in the audience, and we were listening to tech talks given by all these talented engineers showing what this platform can do, and we were wondering, how do we help our people start on their own GraphQL journey?
So today we wanted to share with you how we think GraphQL is transforming how we build our products and how we think about them. So we're going to use some stories from the last year as a small team within a large company, building a graph that's powering some of our biggest travel brands. And we're going to do that through a series of stories in which we're going to look at how our success has been founded on a startup mindset, right? And we'll see how that served us. We'll maybe talk about how it might serve you, and then we'll talk about where we went wrong and where we got back on course. So, reasonable to ask, Expedia Group, big company, been around for 20 years, 200 booking sites, 25 travel brands, Expedia, Hotels.com, Travelocity, Orbitz, Vrbo, HomeAway. I think I hit everybody that's here. There's a lot more. So why would we want or even think we need to think like a startup, right? We've got big teams and platform teams and lots of resources. Well, it's because we think that doing something new requires agility and risk-taking. And the larger your team, right, the more stakeholders, the more top-down, the more pre-planned, the more processed, the harder it is to make those kind of agile changes in your planning. So we like the constraints of small startup type teams. We find they're more successful, they keep you honest, and they push back against the kind of wishful thinking and long roadmaps that often we get into trouble with big initiatives. So here are some startup mindsets, kind of some classic ones. We're going to go through those, and we'll talk about how they have helped us along the way. And Jim, I think you're going to start us off?
Yeah. Start lean, stay agile. We hear this everywhere, but sometimes we forget why. The truth is, it's easier to try new things with small teams. Low overhead and quick coordination let you spend more time building, and you can change priority in an hour if you need to. So this agility and focus is just critical when you're heading into a new project, when you're heading into the unknown. We found that the need for process is a symptom of the lossy communications of a large distributed organization. And when we start small, we need way less process. So who makes up this lean product team? You need the people who have the skills to build your product. But if you don't also find people who have felt the pain of the problems you're trying to solve, you're missing out on something key. We found 8 people from around our organization and around the world who were intimately familiar with wrestling the problems we wanted to solve. And they were passionate about solving them. Dan?
Yeah, well, next is maybe one of the most important.
Speaking of customers.
Yeah, customers. Just a small tagline. So you can't possibly build a great product or a platform if you don't know exactly the problems you're trying to solve and deeply understand them and who you're trying to solve them for, right? In our case, our customer were the internal product teams that were building front-end experiences for our travelers. So what did they need? Well, first of all, who are they? They are all over the globe in different offices that we have. They're in different team structures. They have different experience levels, different ways of work, and they work on different platforms, of course, right? But collectively, they have some similar needs. So let's walk through those real quick. They want to move fast, right? They want to deliver features. Of course, they want to experiment quickly and widely. But yet, they also want those experiences that they're creating to feel like they fit together. So customers come to our site, our apps, and chat and email, and they want a consistent experience. They want it to feel like it all fits together. So that's a challenge of organization and coordination, right? And that's before dealing with maybe the change that's happening underneath them. So our front-end applications rely on dozens of APIs below them, right? And they're always changing versioning. They're moving to the cloud. Endpoints are changing. There's a lot of churn there that they have to manage. And finally, who can forget the never-ending and cyclical replatforming costs, right? On the front end, platform evolution is happening faster than ever. So we've got teams looking at Swift UI. We've been doing a migration to progressive web apps. And that process it takes time, but it's even worse if you've got lots of the rich business logic encoded in each of those front ends, because the API is only providing the data. That means you are doing a lot of rewrites and testing that feature and those products back to sort of neutrality. And that's just a long way to go. So
That sounds like an awful lot to coordinate. How are we going to do it?
well, I mean, we know how to do it.
Program manage all the things.
Bust out the Trello, Slack channels, email, newsletters, what else? Video conferences. Maybe we throw in like an all hands or something and talk about the big new effort we're all putting together. We know how to do this, right?
Oh my God. Program manage all the things.
My whole career. Yeah, we got to find a better way. So next, now, hearing that list, if you're like me, you're thinking, we got to get to solutions. Like we got to solve some of these problems. But before we do, let's take a step back, let's breathe, and let's think about where it's all going. Because at your organization, at your company, there's other things going on. I mean, I know it'd be fun to think that everything revolves around your team, but there are other priorities. So figure out like how your work fits within that larger framework, because that will help you guide when is the right time to head in one direction or another. So that's our vision, or I should say, our vision was really pretty simple when you boil it down, right? There were two parts. We wanted to have that seamless experience we talked about, and we just wanted it to happen faster, right, and with less effort. Why? I've been at the company for longer than I'm going to say publicly, but long enough to have built some of our applications 3 times. And it takes so much time and energy to do that that we don't get to work on the problems that the industry has long promised travelers, like amazing travel planning and incredible personalization. It's just always on the backlog. So we really wanted to work faster and better. So our approach, and this is where GraphQL comes in, right? Far more than a better REST, we're convinced that GraphQL for the first time is transformational because it defines a single layer, where your product can actually be understood, discovered, and leveraged by all your clients. And as importantly, your product team can see it all together, can improve it, and can think about it holistically rather than thinking about its expression in every single front end, which has been what's happened for years at Expedia. And finally, then putting it in that layer, and Matt kind of mentioned this in the keynote, but putting that layer between the front ends and the back ends, which are constantly churning and changing and growing and evolving, means could it possibly survive? Could it endure the next cycle of replatforms and rewrites? Because that would be something pretty fundamentally new. And finally, we could have that application grow over time, not have to get rewritten. So next mindset.
We've done our research, we've got our team. We asked ourselves the question, what can we do that would gather the critical mass needed to build this huge Expedia travel graph? And whether you're building something that you're selling or you're building a product for your internal team, the answer is the same. We had to make something that people want to use. And I'm looking at the stares in the audience like, thanks, Jim, for your sage advice. But think back to the last internal tool that you used that was just bad. It's undocumented, it's hard to use. Sometimes it doesn't even work. We knew we had to do better than that. And so this was our answer to getting that traction. We knew we needed to create a single graph for our front-end clients to consume. So that's what we did. And prior to Apollo Federation, we used the schema stitching. We also knew that we wanted to streamline creating SDLs and writing resolvers. So we decided to go code first. Kotlin was our language of choice. So our team open sourced GraphQL Kotlin. And that did 2 things. We solved our problem, and we also got to give back to the GraphQL community, which is awesome. There's some nuance to going code first, though. For people who are new to GraphQL, it's not always obvious when a code change might result in a breaking schema change. At Expedia's scale, it's outrageously expensive to have a breaking schema change happen in production. So we needed to put a system in place that gave our developers confidence and also provided a safety net. Now, we needed to monitor all of our clients' operations and compare those against any potential schema changes. This is an incredibly complicated system to build. So instead of trying to do it ourselves, we invested in the Apollo schema validation. This has basically already paid for itself by preventing numerous potential live site outages, and we're super happy with it. So it's not enough to just build a service. You also need to monitor it. Our teams are going to need things like request tracing and event logging and performance monitoring and alerting. So we took our platform and we plugged it into our existing ops stack. This got our customers to production fast, but there was still a need. We needed a way to see what people are doing with the graph, to combine the health of our services and the health of our clients into a single view that talked to us in a way that made sense for a GraphQL API. This is another specialty tool, so rather than double the size of our small team and take a year building something that may or may not do what we need it to do, we used Apollo Graph Manager. This has worked out great, and it's freed us up to focus on other things. So these first 4 things in isolation reduce the friction to create a GraphQL microservice in production, but it's not enough. We needed something that our teams could pull off the shelf, start writing their business logic, and have a working GraphQL API in an hour or 2. So we took these 4 things, we packaged it into a single service template, and now we think we have the answer not only to easily build a GraphQL microservice at Expedia, but the easiest way for a team to create a customer experience. So that's all well and good, and we think we have the answer to get the traction we need, but how are we going to pay for it?
It's funding time. There's a lot of different routes, right, to funding an internal project. You can do demos and POCs, and those are good, and we did it. You can pitch to senior executives. Sometimes you get pitched, and there's a top-down mandate to do this. But the one we wanted to talk about, the route we wanted to talk to you about is, we think, sort of universally applicable in lots of situations and lots of organizations. And it's kind of just a mind shift trick, and that is just to think like the boss. Think like a founder. Like, if you could make the call, like, would you? Really? And why would you? And what would you need to know that it was a good investment? Thinking this way gets rid of the sort of lazy thinking of, come on, I want to do this because it's cool, or I think I should, and it makes you focused, right? It makes you get lean and scrappy and act like the resources that you're spending are ones that you're paying for. So let's talk about what happens next. So you get some initial seed funding, right? You're off and running, and you're building your graph. Now, if you take this sort of hopefully universal mandate and you just run out for a year for your grand vision, you're setting yourself up for surefire change, right? I mean, you're putting yourself at risk. So instead, and we've heard this today, you've got to deliver value. You've got to find something that your business needs that you can solve in the short term and deliver it. And that should be customer value that translates to business value. And that's not enough, because you've got to keep that process going, because change is going to come around the corner, right? In any of these projects, they're going to take time. And whether that change is a priority shift, new senior leadership, a merger, an acquisition, we've been through all of those. If you want your project to survive that change, the best way to do that is to consistently deliver value, right, for relatively low investment. And then it's really an easy decision when senior leaders are trying to decide where to invest, because they see, oh, there's a team. Every time that we give them resources, they deliver value. So that's just a key thing you want to think about to survive the change that's going to come. So we've done a lot of talking about theory, and maybe we do a story or 2 or 3?
We're going to tell a few stories that show how we demonstrated value early, how we learned to be humble, how we had to change direction, and ultimately how we continue to get funding for our vision. When we first built our native applications, we also built a set of specialized mobile APIs. And these mobile APIs exposed the capabilities of our monolith web app. We started with a shared code base, but the web team was going off in another direction and migrating to their more modern web stack. And as they were doing that, the mobile APIs became stale. They were missing out on features. Our fastest growing platform, our native app platform, was left to play catch up, and they were feeling the pain. I know this because I came from the native app team, and all I felt was pain. So it was almost like the lodging team had just launched their mission to the moon, and we were stuck in a cave building tools out of stone. From the very beginning, when Dan and I and the team kicked off our GraphQL journey, we had our eyes on this prize. Create a single shared API, a common place for the native teams and the web teams to talk about lodging as a product, to unleash the native apps to reach their full potential. And even more importantly, take a huge step towards building these cohesive experiences for our travelers and gaining platform leverage along the way. The short story is we did it. This is our first success. We set out and we did it.
Sorry, no, and we chose a problem.
Our iOS and Android clients had migrated to our new graph-based queries, and suddenly features that had been sitting in the backlog for months were just there in the graph. This is super exciting for us. Our mobile engineers were so happy. They were able to implement features in hours and days, things that would have previously taken them weeks. Like, we felt we really had this just nailed. So let's just do a quick recap, like why this worked for us. Our stakeholders, they really cared about getting the latest and greatest features for our native apps. And we had provided a path to get there. And we partnered with our native app team, who were hungry as we were about solving this problem. And we didn't take a year to do this. We did this in a month or two. And so we showed this value quickly, and this caused other people to want to get in the graph too. But not everything went perfectly,
No, I never.
as things rarely do. Our small core team that built that initial lodging schema, we did that on behalf of the lodging team. We thought we were helping them out because they were busy with other things, and we were going to hand them over this shiny new toy, and they would thank us for it. But it turns out we were way wrong. We had solved the traveler problem and the business problem, but we didn't solve our customer problem. Our customer, our platform customer, was that lodging team. And we had kind of taken away the opportunity for them to learn how to build this schema and GraphQL service. And by doing that, we kind of robbed them of the ownership that you feel when you get to build something awesome and new. So, big oops, but we learned, we switched gears, we came up with a transition plan that put the lodging team back in the driver's seat, and crisis averted. Lesson learned, like, we can't design someone else's schema for them. They need to take that ownership. But it's in the past, we learned, pretty much ready for anything at this point.
Yeah, here's our hubris story. So we got this, right? We got momentum, teams are joining the graph, everyone seems to get it. We really feel like we have the tiger by the tail, which is a terrible handle for a tiger, just FYI. And our tiger showed up in the next big product team to join the graph. They were really ready to go. They had been planning their attack for a couple of months. They had a big complicated domain problem, important to the business. A bunch of teams lined up. They were going to also do the progressive web app at the same time. So, I mean, what could go wrong, right? We got lots of momentum.
Hold on.
What?
We got huge team,
Yeah,
new back end,
sure.
new front end,
Well, yeah,
a year worth of milestones.
plus, yeah.
How is this the lean, agile startup approach?
All right, fair. But, you know, we had just come off of a mistake of, like, doing too much, right? So we really wanted to be those GraphQL champions, and step back and let this team kind of own their process. Let's talk about real quickly how that went. They published a schema for us to look at, and it was a nice GraphQL schema of a traditional REST API. They'd built this API many times over the years. And it did what it was intended to do, but what it didn't do, it didn't thin out the clients. And so we talked to them. We said, oh, this is the new vision. It's gonna, we're gonna make these API much richer and have behavior in it like our BFFs so that the front ends can get thin. But they said, that's gonna require us to literally work with teams that are in different time zones, right? The front end engineers are in one place, the back end engineers in another place. And as we got into this, we realized we had just fundamentally misunderstood our customer. And we hadn't given them the time. We had kind of a 2.5-year head start. So it was very unfair for us to assume that they had that time to get used to this new model. And we had picked a super ambitious goal, right? Because we were so confident from all of our wins. Why not just go for broke, right? We'd forgotten to stay lean. So repair and recovery are key, right? You're going to make mistakes, especially if you're a champion, right? You've got good intent, but not always good results. So don't be afraid of being humble. Admit your mistakes. We got this team and sat down with them. They got back on track. They picked a new problem. They put it in production, and then they got the confidence to now plan the rest of their roadmap. So, and also lean into that friction. If one of the teams within your organization is not getting it according to you, it's probably because you're not explaining something right or you're not thinking about it right. So lean into that friction. Jim, what do we got next?
I'm starting to see some patterns here. This whole story is almost like we're just learning from our mistakes. Speaking of mistakes, we let our customers run. And instead of trying to put our arms around them, we just let them get their products in the graph. And now that we've done this, we finally have defined in a single layer an understanding of how our products work. And what this is doing is that now our customers are seeing patterns. They're seeing what the team over here did to solve a particular problem, and they're sharing it. And now they're asking us the questions. What's the same about these experiences? And what, if anything, is meaningfully different? Do we need the lodging and the flights and the activities and the car teams to each build and express their own opinion of what a sort and filter screen is in our graph? Or can we build this once and power them all with a single operation? Our next chapter is going to be Serverdriven UI, building an experiment that can run across all of our platforms, all of our lines of business, and doing that without touching a single line of code in our web app or pushing anything to the app stores. Can we do it? I think we can, but this is a bit of a tease because we're going to cover that story in another talk. Basically what I'm trying to say is our job is all done here, cash in, go home, time to retire.
IPO time, right? Nah, not hardly. We've got so much work left to do, but let's do this. Let's review those mindsets and kind of check in and see how we're doing. So start lean, stay agile. How are we doing?
So just to touch back on patterns, not a lot has changed here. We're still staying lean. We are growing our team to get more global coverage, but we're talking about going from 8 people to 10 people, not from 8 to 100.
So we still think we got the vision, and we know our customer, and we're just trying to round out the edges and pay attention to the community to make sure that any needs that come up, we address.
Like Dan said, our vision is the same. We're starting to see more teams practice it, but it's not completely business as usual. We're going to continue to use this platform to demonstrate value and look for opportunities to get more people to join on board.
We think we identified the solution to the product problem, and the fit is good. We continue to work on adopting more on the platform side and operations registry, and we're looking ahead at Federation. We're really excited about that.
We've gotten continued support and funding from just getting new products and teams on the graph. And our next round of funding is going to come from helping teams use Serverdriven UI to do more with less effort.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. It's been really exciting to be able to share the story, but we really almost are more interested in hearing yours. In just the brief time we've been here this morning, there's so many echoes of what we're experiencing. So we're really looking to the community to help teach all of us how to handle these things.
Swing by our booth. We're over there in the corner. We also have teammates from our Vrbo and HomeAway, Vrbo, HomeAway, and Hotels.com.
That's right.
And we'd love to hear your stories. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you
Thank
next
you.
year.